Ethan Walker sat at the kitchen table in his Denver apartment, his laptop open on the table and his phone next to it. It was getting dark outside, but Ethan barely noticed it. His mind was elsewhere, in Austin, Texas, where his 8-year-old son Noah lived with his ex-wife Madison. It had been almost a year since the court had approved their divorce and given Madison primary custody of Noah. Their marriage was already on the rocks. A few months before the divorce, Madison had admitted to cheating on him. Ethan didn't want to stir it up. He just wanted Noah to go through the separation from his parents as calmly as possible. At the time, Ethan, an engineer by profession, decided that it would be best for his son. The boy would still have a familiar home, school, and friends, and Ethan was working too much and traveling often. It seemed reasonable to give in. But with each passing month, Ethan's doubts grew stronger. He called Noah every week, sometimes more often, but lately the conversations were troubling him more and more. Ethan remembered a recent phone call. Noah seemed depressed and answered in monosyllables. Madison rarely gave them a chance to talk alone, but was always there, prompting her son for answers. When Ethan asked how school was going, Madison's voice could be heard off screen. "Tell Dad everything's okay." Noah had answered, "Everything's okay, Dad." But the boy's intonation gave away the opposite. There was tension in his voice, as if he were afraid of something. Ethan closed his eyes, trying to calm himself. Maybe it was just a childish tantrum, or maybe it was just a transition divorce was hard on kids. He wanted to believe that Madison was taking care of Noah properly. She had been a loving mother before, and even though their marriage had ended, there was no reason to doubt her parenting skills. At least not at first. The phone on the table vibrated. Ethan jumped and looked at the screen. It was his mother, Barbara Walker. He ran a hand over his face and accepted the call. "Hi, Mom," he said quietly, trying to hide the worry in his voice. "Hello, dear. How are you?" Barbara's soft voice came from the speaker. "Everything is fine. I am working as usual," Ethan replied, looking at the lines of code frozen on the laptop screen. He didn't like lying to his mother, but he didn't want to worry her either. Barbara, however, felt her son's condition even from a distance. "Are you sure?" she asked. "You sound tired. Have you talked to Noah recently?" At the mention of his son, Ethan couldn't help but grip the phone tighter. "Yes, a few days ago," he admitted reluctantly. "Everything seemed fine." "I think so." The mother's voice became alarmed. "Ethan, I know you. Something wrong?" He sighed. It had always been difficult for him to hide his feelings from his mother. It seemed to me that Noah was a stranger. As if he was afraid to say something unnecessary, he finally admitted, "And Madison doesn't let him speak freely. It seems like she controls his every move." Barbara was silent for a few seconds on the other end of the line. "Do you think they have problems?" she asked cautiously. "I don't know." Ethan ran a hand through his short, dark hair. "It just feels like he's unhappy there. I know divorce is stressful, but it's been a while." "Have you talked to Madison about this?" her mother asked. Ethan smiled bitterly. "We've been through this before, Mom. After she cheated on me, I didn't see any point in clinging to the marriage only to Noah's peace of mind. I tried. Every time I bring up the topic, she assures me that Noah is doing great. She says that he just misses me, which is why he calls me sadly. And she also complains about stress. It's hard to raise a child alone. There's not enough money. Although I pay child support regularly." "Not enough money?" Barbara asked, a hint of surprise. "But Noah still has a trust fund from me and my dad. We saved for his college." "I know, Mom," Ethan nodded, feeling an unpleasant chill. "But that money won't be available until Noah turns 18, unless the court allows it to be used earlier for the child's needs." "We didn't give that permission," Barbara said firmly. "That money is inviolable, except for what the court says is absolutely necessary." "Yes," Ethan said slowly, although Madison mentioned a couple of months ago that she had to use some of the trust funds for some medical bills. "Medical bills?" The mother was worried. "Is Noah okay?" "With Noah, yes. She said it was for her own treatment. that she had some health problems. He frowned, remembering that conversation. At the time, he hadn't attached any importance to it. He had taken her word for it. I didn't ask what the matter was. I offered to help, but she refused, saying that since it was from the fund, it wasn't my concern. Barbara sighed heavily. This is all strange. It's somehow unfair to take her son's money for her own needs, even if she's not feeling well. Have you checked the account statements? No, Ethan admitted. I don't have direct access. The trustee was supposed to send a report once a year, and he glanced at the file on the shelf. It should be coming soon. I see. The mother paused, then added softly, maybe you should go visit Noah, just to make sure he's okay. Ethan felt a knot of worry in his stomach, a thought that had been coming to him more and more frequently in recent weeks. I've thought about it, Mom, he admitted quietly, but I'm afraid Madison might take the sudden visit with hostility. What difference does it make? Barbara retorted. He's your son. You have a right to see him. You have your contractual weekends with him, right? Yes, I'm supposed to spend part of the holidays and some weekends with him. But every time I offered to come, Madison found reasons to refuse. Noah had classes, or they were going to her relatives, or he was sick. Ethan felt irritated, remembering all the excuses. In the end, I haven't seen him in person for almost a year, only video calls. Saying this out loud, he himself was horrified. A year without a personal meeting with his son, although it was only a few hours' flight between Denver and Austin. On the other end of the line, Barbara also gasped. A year, Ethan? This is unacceptable. You need to see Noah. I'm sure you have a bad feeling for a reason. Ethan was silent, fiddling with his pen. The bad feeling really didn't go away. Every night he fell asleep thinking about his son, and sometimes he even dreamed that Noah was crying and calling for him. You're right, he finally exhaled, having made his decision. There was a certain firmness in his voice. I can't ignore this anymore. I'm going to talk to my boss about taking time off tomorrow and buy a ticket to Austin. That's great, Barbara said with relief. Are you going to tell Madison or surprise her? I think I'll surprise you first. I want to see it for myself, Ethan admitted. If it's okay, so much the better. I'll spend time with Noah and come back. And if not. He didn't finish, but they both understood what he meant. If something was wrong, he had to intervene. Call me when you arrive, okay? The mother asked. And take care of yourself. Definitely, Mom, he replied. After saying goodbye, Ethan put his phone down and closed his laptop. The decision had finally come. He stood up from the table and walked to the window. The lights of nighttime Denver spread out below, but Ethan's gaze was directed into the darkness. He felt it was time to act. Tomorrow he will go to Austin and find out the truth for himself. 2 days after his conversation with his mother, Ethan Walker stepped onto the hot concrete of the Austin airport runway. The heat of the Texas afternoon contrasted with the cool of the Denver mountains. Ethan took off his jacket and slung it over his arm as he walked out of the terminal. A small backpack was his only luggage. He had arrived light, hoping to be done in a few days. On the way from the airport, sitting behind the wheel of the rental car, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Noah. He imagined how happy he would be to see him unexpectedly. Perhaps his fears were unfounded, and his son really was just bored. Deep down, Ethan prayed that this would be the case. But the chill of foreboding wouldn't go away. To save time, Ethan decided to stop by Noah's school first. He knew his son was supposed to be in 2nd grade at Westlake Elementary School in North Austin, according to the custody papers after Madison moved. If all was well, he would pick Noah up right from school and have a little celebration together. Parking in front of the one-story red brick school building, Ethan noticed that recess had ended and the courtyard was quiet. There was about an hour left until classes ended. He entered through the main entrance, introduced himself to the security guard, and headed toward the administration. At the reception desk, the secretary, an elderly woman with a friendly smile, looked up from her computer. "How can I help you?" she asked. "Hello, I'm the father of Noah Walker, a 2nd grader," Ethan began, a little hesitantly. I'd like to get some information on him. His mother and I are divorced, and I just got here from Colorado and am planning on picking him up after school today. The woman nodded and began searching for something in the database on the computer. The student's last name, you say, Walker? Noah Walker. She tapped the keyboard. Let's see. At first, concentration appeared on her face, then a slight confusion appeared. It's strange, she muttered without looking up from the screen. Ethan felt a lump in his throat. Is something wrong? He leaned closer to the counter, trying to look at the monitor. The secretary turned her gaze to him. Your son, he is no longer enrolled in our school. What? Ethan didn't understand at first. There must be some kind of mistake. Perhaps you entered the name incorrectly. Noah Walker, 2nd grade. The name is correct, the woman said doubtfully and clarified. The child's mother is Madison Carter. Yes, that's right, Ethan confirmed, feeling his heart beat faster. Here's the entry. Noah Walker, date of birth matches. The secretary turned the monitor toward him. It says here that his mother withdrew the personnel file 3 months ago. The comment says, family is transitioning to homeschooling. Homeschooling, Ethan barely managed to get the words out. He didn't know for sure. Madison hadn't told him anything like that. The secretary looked at him sympathetically. Yes, in April she came with a statement that from the end of the academic quarter, she would study with her son herself at home. We had to issue an expulsion at the request of the parent. Ethan was at a loss for words for a moment. Noah had been out of school for 3 months, and he had no idea. Why did Madison hide such an important thing from him? Everything inside him went cold. This did not fit into the image of a responsible mother that he knew his ex-wife to be. Tell me, he finally spoke, trying to remain calm. What about his academic performance? And in general, how did Noah study before he was expelled? Were there any problems? The woman frowned, remembering something. Academically, he was a bright boy, although he was noticeably declining in the last months before leaving. He often missed classes. His mother explained it by illness, allergies, or asthma. I don't remember exactly. The teacher, Miss Gomez, was even worried. She said Noah looked tired, lethargic, and sometimes he came home without breakfast. We tried to discuss it with Mrs. Carter. What is she? Ethan asked quickly. The secretary shrugged. She assured me that everything was under control, that the boy was not handling the climate well, or that they were going through a difficult period in the family. And then she suddenly took away the documents. Of course, we had no right to refuse. Every parent has the right to switch to homeschooling. Ethan nodded, though inside he was seething. 3 months his son had been out of school, supposedly homeschooled. But what if that was just an excuse? What if Noah was really too sick, or Madison just didn't want people to see how bad he was? The thought was so terrifying that Ethan was momentarily speechless. He quickly thanked the secretary for her help and, keeping his panic at bay, walked out of the school office. Outside, the scorching sun hit his face, but he barely felt the heat. The picture was very alarming. His son had suddenly stopped going to school, looked tired and hungry, according to the teachers, and his mother was hiding everything from him, making up stories. Ethan took out his phone and hesitated for a few seconds, then decisively dialed Madison's number. Beep. Second. Third. Finally, a familiar voice answered. Yes. Madison, it's Ethan, he said as calmly as he could, although inside he was shaking. I'm in Austin. I thought I'd come see Noah. There was a tense silence on the other end of the line. Then Madison answered sharply. Why? You didn't warn me. We're busy. Ethan gripped the steering wheel with his palm, trying not to lose his temper. Noah is my son, and according to the agreement, I can visit him. I'll stop by today. It's not right now, she snapped. He has, a club, then a doctor. Better next time, by appointment. Lies. Ethan no longer doubted it. He barely contained his anger. Madison, I'm already in town. I'm on my way to your house. I'll be there in half an hour. Ethan, don't you dare show up uninvited. she snapped. I might call the police. Call, he said, and disconnected the connection. His hands shook as he started the engine. Half an hour, and he would know the truth. Ethan felt his fear for his son turn to determination. No matter what happens, he won't back down until he's sure Noah is safe. Madison lived on a quiet street in suburban Austin with low-rise houses, sun-bleached lawns, and dusty driveways. Ethan's heart was pounding in his ears as he pulled up to the address. Number 17 was a rundown house with an unkempt lawn and old newspapers piled high on the porch. The windows were covered with thick curtains in broad daylight. Ethan stopped the car and got out, looking around. There was no one on the street. The hot afternoon heat had driven everyone indoors. He walked quickly up the steps and knocked on the door. For several long seconds, nothing happened. Ethan raised his hand to knock again when he heard footsteps outside the door. The door chain clicked and the door opened a crack. Madison stood in the doorway. Ethan barely recognized his ex-wife in the thin, disheveled woman. Madison's hair was unkempt and there were dark shadows under her eyes. "What do you want?" Her voice sounded tense, almost frightened. Ethan tried to speak calmly, although inside he was seething. "I came to see Noah. Where is he?" Madison's cheek twitched as if she had a nervous tic. "You're at the wrong time. I told you on the phone, it's not possible now. I want to make sure my son is okay," Ethan said firmly. "Why won't you let me in? Is Noah home?" "He's sleeping," she answered after a pause. "I don't want to wake him. Come tomorrow, you can talk." Ethan didn't believe a word of it. He tried to stick his hand through the half-open door. "Maddie, stop. I'm going to see him anyway, one way or another." But Madison pushed the door open, pushing it against the frame. "Go away, Ethan. You have no right to break into my house." He noticed her hands shaking on the door and felt a growing sense of alarm. "Madison, if something happened to Noah." "He's all right," she shouted sharply, and then, lowering her voice, added, "Just leave now. Don't make a scene." There was a sound from deep within the house, like a dull groan or creak. Ethan strained his ears. "Noah," he called through the door. "Noah, can you hear me? It's Daddy." "Quiet," Madison hissed furiously, trying to slam the door. At that moment, a weak voice came from the depths of the house. Bye. Ethan's blood ran cold. He distinctly heard the hoarse whisper of a child. It was Noah. Without thinking, he pulled the door towards himself. The chain tightened, preventing it from opening fully. "Noah," he repeated louder. "Son, I'm here." "Get lost." A male voice suddenly rang out from inside the house. A tall man came rushing to the door cold-hearted. The name that had started the final crack in their marriage. Then he had been just a friend, and then confession and divorce. He pushed Madison aside and peered through the crack. His posture was aggressive, sinewy tattooed arms, clenched fists. Cole's face was twisted with anger. "You have no right to come here," he growled, narrowing his eyes. "Get out while you're still in one piece." "Where is Noah?" Ethan persisted, seething with rage and fear. "I heard his voice." "You heard something. You didn't hear anyone," Cole said, but his eyes were lying. He glanced briefly back toward the house, and Ethan caught the confirmation in that movement. Noah was there, and he needed help. "Get away from the door," Ethan demanded. "I'll take my son." In response, Cole grinned, demonstratively taking his phone out of his pocket. "One more step, and I'm calling the cops. You're breaking into someone else's house." Ethan knew that any thoughtless action could backfire on him now. He felt a helpless rage his son was a few meters away, possibly injured or sick, and he could do nothing. "Please," he said, trying to contain himself. "If Noah is sick, I will help. Let's take him to the doctor." "Get out," Cole repeated, slamming the door shut. The chain clanked and the locks clicked. Ethan stood on the porch, his heart pounding in his chest. He pounded on the closed door for a few seconds, shouting, "Madison, Cole, open up or I'm actually going to call the police." "Noah." There was no sound from inside. The neighbor's dog began to bark at someone's noise. Realizing that he couldn't get through alone, Ethan pulled out his cell phone and dialed 911 with trembling fingers. The operator responded almost immediately. 911, what happened to you? Help, Ethan breathed, running off the porch and toward his car so the intruders couldn't hear the conversation. The address is 213 Riverside Road. My 8-year-old son is locked in the house, possibly injured or malnourished. The child's mother won't let me in and refuses to show me her son. The child was screaming for me, calling for help. The operator's voice became clear and serious. Repeat the address, please. Ethan repeated, trying to speak clearly, even though his throat was constricted with horror. Please, hurry up. I'm afraid something terrible might happen to him. The police have already left. Stay on the line, the operator reassured. Ethan turned back to the house. The curtains were still tightly closed. He didn't know what was going on inside at this moment. Every minute could count. He silently prayed that he would make it in time. About 10 minutes later, 2 police cars pulled up to the house with their lights on but no sirens. Ethan immediately went to meet them. 3 officers got out of the cars, 2 men and 1 woman. You called? Asked one, a strong-built sergeant with a short, blonde buzz cut. Yes, I am, Ethan nodded. I am the boy's father. He is inside, being held by his mother and her partner. Please help. The policemen looked at each other. The female officer asked calmly, what exactly happened? You told the operator that the child might be locked in and needed medical attention. Ethan quickly recounted everything, that he came to visit his son, found a strange situation, heard his voice, but his mother and her boyfriend did not let him see him. He mentioned that his son had not been going to school for several months and was probably very neglected. Got it, the sergeant nodded and took out his radio, ordering someone to provide backup. Then he looked at his colleagues. Knock. If they don't open, we enter by force. The child is potentially in danger. One of the policemen stepped back and stood at the porch, his hand on his holster. The sergeant and the female officer walked to the door. Ethan stayed behind, his heart pounding with tension. The sergeant knocked loudly. Austin police, open the door. There was movement in the house. There was a painful pause. The policeman repeated his demand, louder this time. Finally, the door slowly opened, without a chain, but they only allowed a small peek inside. Madison was standing there again, smiling wearily. Good afternoon, officers, she muttered unnaturally. Sorry, we had a family dispute here. Everything has already been resolved. My son is fine. The female officer leaned forward, trying to meet Madison's gaze. We received a call that your child may be in danger. We need to check on him. Danger? Madison tried to feign surprise. No, it's a misunderstanding. Noah is just sleeping. He was sick. He needed rest. We were just. The sergeant didn't let her finish. Ma'am, please step aside. We need to inspect the premises. Madison turned pale and pressed herself against the doorway. No, I mean, maybe we shouldn't. He's really sleeping. Cole appeared behind Madison. His face was darker than a cloud, but he tried to appear calm. Officer, everything is fine. The child is simply unwell. He needs rest. We do not want him to be disturbed. And this man, Cole nodded towards Ethan, is simply stirring up panic. He is my stepfather. He lied brazenly, but he has not lived with us for a long time, so he is overly worried. Ethan couldn't resist. This is a lie. I am Noah's father, and this man is a stranger to my son. Please check the child. He may be in trouble. The policewoman put her hand on Ethan's shoulder, signaling him to remain calm. The sergeant stepped closer to the door. Ma'am, we have reason to believe that the child may require assistance. Either you let us in, or we will have to go in ourselves. Cole wanted to object, but suddenly a distinct, weak cry was heard from the depths of the house. Dad. Ethan recognized his son's voice. His heart sank. Noah, he shouted, trying to push forward. That was enough. The sergeant shoved Madison aside and rushed inside. The female officer and the second cop followed him. Ethan paused on the porch for only a moment, then stepped through the open door, unable to wait outside any longer. Screams and stomping could be heard in the house. The police rushed deeper, towards the sound of a voice calling for the father. Ethan followed the police into the house. The corridor led to the living room, where there was semi-darkness and disorder, empty bottles, dirty dishes. The sergeant had already opened the door to one of the rooms. His loud voice came from there. "Hands up. Don't move." The next second, Madison's shrill scream was heard. "No, please." Ethan rushed towards the sound. As he flew into the room, a terrible picture appeared before his eyes. Noah. Ethan's voice caught in his throat. He rushed to his son's side, falling to his knees next to him. The police sergeant, meanwhile, led the disarmed Cole out of the corner of the room. He was lying face down on the floor, his hands cuffed behind his back. A female officer was handcuffing him. Madison stood against the wall, sobbing and reaching out to Noah. "He's sick. I didn't want to. This is all for his own good." "Shut up," the second policeman barked at her, holding her by the elbow. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in court." Madison sniffled and fell silent, looking at her son with wide eyes. Ethan barely heard any of this. He gently put his arm around Noah's shoulders. The boy flinched, but his eyes widened. Recognizing his father, Noah made a soft, crying sound. "Dad, I'm here, son, I'm here," Ethan whispered, trying not to show the tears that were welling up in his eyes. He felt his son. His skin was hot and dry. His breathing was weak. "Water, bring water," Ethan shouted, looking around. "They called an ambulance. They're on their way," the female officer replied. She quickly handed him a plastic bottle from the kitchen. Ethan lifted Noah's head and carefully placed the neck of the bottle to his son's cracked lips. "Drink, but slowly," he said softly. Noah took a few small sips, coughed, but greedily reached for the bottle again. Ethan, supporting him, looked back at the police. "What will happen to them?" He nodded at Madison and Cole. The sergeant was already leading Cole into the living room, handcuffing him and pinning his arms behind his back. "They'll be charged with child abuse," he replied dryly. "The main thing for you right now is to take care of the boy." Madison tried to come closer, crying, "Ethan, I'm sorry. It's all because of the illness. I needed the money." He understood. Ethan flushed with anger. He turned to face her with a jerk. "You locked him up. You spent his money on yourself. You lied to him. What disease?" The female officer stopped this exchange by standing between them. "Ma'am, step aside." Madison sobbed and allowed herself to be led away by the policeman. As he passed, she held out her hand pleadingly. "Noah, honey, I wanted the best." The boy shuddered in his father's arms and turned away, pressing himself against Ethan's chest. Ethan hugged him tighter, feeling the chills run through him. "I'm taking the detainees out," the sergeant said, leading Cole toward the exit. Another officer was pulling Madison along with him, already cuffing her wrists. She didn't resist, just sobbed quietly. As they disappeared from the house, the female officer crouched down next to Ethan and Noah. "The ambulance will arrive soon." "How is he?" Ethan shook his head, his voice shaking. "He is very weak, dehydrated. He needs medical attention." "Dad." Noah called out barely audibly, looking at Ethan with inflamed eyes. "Don't go. I won't let you go anywhere again, do you hear me?" The father answered firmly, stroking his son's tangled hair. "It's all over. You're safe." The boy's lips trembled, and he burst into tears, pressing his face into Ethan's chest. Only now did Ethan let the tears flow. He held his son tightly, feeling hot drops of relief and pain running down his cheeks. A few minutes later, ambulance sirens were heard outside the house. Paramedics, a middle-aged man and a young woman, hurriedly carried a stretcher and equipment inside. The female officers stood up, giving them their seat. "Here, the child is here." The medics immediately sat down next to Noah. The male paramedic began the examination. He checked the boy's pulse, shone a flashlight into his eyes, and put a sensor on his finger. "We're going to St. David's Children's Hospital," she said. She looked at Ethan. Are you the father? Yes, he nodded, not letting go of Noah's hand. We'll put him on a drip and transport him. You'd better come with us. Of course I'll go, Ethan said firmly. The paramedic was already inserting Enroman 4 into the boy's thin arm. Noah closed his eyes from the injection and groaned quietly. Ethan stroked his shoulder. Be patient, my dear. Everything will be fine. You are strong. As Noah was carefully placed on the stretcher, he held his father's hand. Ethan realized that he didn't want to let go of his son's hand for a second either. We're ready, the paramedic said. Ethan helped carry the stretcher outside to a waiting ambulance. Police were bustling around the house as neighbors began to peer out of their homes, drawn by the lights and the commotion. Madison and Cole were already in separate patrol cars. Ethan could see Madison's white, confused face through the glass. She was looking right at him, but Ethan looked away, his thoughts focused on Noah. After placing the stretcher inside the car, the medics allowed Ethan to sit next to his son. The female officer said a short farewell to him. We'll come later to draw up the report. In the meantime, stay with the boy. Ethan nodded gratefully. Thank you for everything. The ambulance doors slammed shut and the car pulled away, siren blaring. Ethan held Noah's small, cold hand while the paramedics monitored the Roman 4 and the machines. He could hardly believe that this was happening. His chest was filled with rage at Madison, horror at his son's condition, and incredible relief that he had found Noah and would not let him go. Ethan leaned towards his son and quietly repeated, Everything is fine, my boy. I am here. Everything will be fine now. The intensive care unit at St. David's Children's Hospital was filled with the quiet hum of machines. Noah lay on a bed hooked to Enroman 4, with monitors attached to his chest and a pulse oximeter on his finger. Ethan sat next to him, his eyes fixed on his son's pale face. Doctors examined Noah and made a preliminary diagnosis. According to the pediatrician on duty, the boy was not allowed to eat normally, assuring that it was for medicinal purposes detox. Fortunately, no dangerous infections or irreversible consequences were found. It was necessary to restore nutrition and water balance gradually under observation. It was also necessary to check the child's psychological state, call a child psychologist. While the doctors were busy with tests and ifs, Noah held Ethan's hand the whole time, like a drowning man holding a life preserver. Even when he was falling into unconsciousness from weakness, he did not unclench his fingers. Ethan did not let go of his small hand either. As the evening wore on, Noah's condition stabilized a little. He slept for a few hours, and when he woke up, he tried to smile at his father for the first time. How are you, hero? Ethan asked quietly, leaning toward his son. Noah shrugged weakly. It hurts. He didn't specify what exactly. It seemed like his whole body ached from lying motionless for so long and from hunger. I know, Ethan squeezed his hand, but it will get better soon. The doctor said they'll feed you up and make you strong. The boy was silent for a few seconds, then suddenly asked, looking at the ceiling, Mom's not here? His voice wavered. Ethan felt a bitter lump in his throat. How to answer, he said softly. Mom is not here. I will be with you now. Noah nodded slightly, either satisfied with the answer or he simply didn't have the energy to discuss it. A minute later, he fell asleep again under the influence of the drugs. Ethan let out a quiet breath. A nurse peered through the door of the room. Mr. Walker, the guardianship authorities have arrived and want to talk to you. Ethan gently unclasped Noah's fingers, stood up, and walked out into the hallway. A woman in her 30s was waiting at the door with a folder in her hands. Hello, I'm Catherine Lewis, a social worker with the Texas Department of Child Protective Services. She introduced herself professionally. Are you Noah Walker's father? Yes, that's right, Ethan confirmed. He had already expected that such a visit was inevitable. I'm so sorry your son had to go through this, Catherine said sympathetically. I'd like to ask you a few questions and explain the next steps. Sure, Ethan nodded. But can we do it on the go? I don't want to leave my son alone for too long. Of course, Catherine nodded and began to talk as they slowly walked together down the hallway outside the room. Noah is currently under state protection, but since you are the biological father and were not involved in the incident, the department is willing to release him to your temporary care, provided that you provide the necessary conditions. I will, Ethan confirmed eagerly. I'll take him home to Denver as soon as the doctors say it's okay. Catherine noted in the folder. For this, we will need a court decision on emergency guardianship. Usually we file a petition, but in this case, you yourself can apply to the court as a father to arrange temporary guardianship. Do you have a lawyer? Ethan scowled. Not in Texas, but it might be worth hiring. I can give you the contact details for free legal aid, or you can find a private family lawyer, the social worker suggested. Either way, while your son is in the hospital, I'll write out a medical intervention permit in your name. She pulled out a form. Sign this so that we can officially make you responsible for decisions regarding the child's health. Ethan quickly signed the proposed papers. Thank you. Catherine continued softly. The mother and her partner have been arrested. They will likely face multiple charges: child abuse, intentional harm. Possibly more if more details emerge. Ethan clenched his fists, trying to keep himself under control. Additional details: is this about Noah's money? The social worker looked at him questioningly, and Ethan briefly recounted what he had found out. How Madison had been spending her son's trust fund under the guise of her own treatment. Catherine's face grew concerned. I see. Financial abuse of a child's funds is also a serious matter. But this will most likely be dealt with separately by a civil or criminal court. Our task now is to protect Noah. Of course, Ethan nodded. I'll take care of him. Catherine closed the folder. That's all for now. I'm sorry about what happened again. We'll be visiting Noah in the coming days and also preparing the paperwork for the guardianship court. I hope you plan to attend. Absolutely, Ethan replied. I'll stay in Austin as long as it takes. They said their goodbyes, and Ethan returned to the room. He sat back down by his son's bed. Noah was sleeping peacefully, the Roman force slowly flowing into his vein. Ethan looked at the child's haggard face, and for the first time in many hours allowed himself to relax, even for a moment. But the relaxation was relative. A fight lay ahead of him for full custody of Noah, for the punishment of the guilty, for the restoration of justice. Late in the evening, Noah woke up again. This time he was more alert. The nurse brought him some broth, and the boy even ate a couple of spoonfuls under his father's supervision. Ethan smiled, noticing the spark of life in his son's eyes. Well done. Little by little, but progress. Noah put down his spoon and looked at Ethan seriously. Dad, will you take me home? Forever. There was such alarm in the question that Ethan's heart sank. Of course I will. I will not give you to anyone else. Even the court, the boy asked quietly. Ethan sighed, trying to find the words. The court is on our side, son. It will decide that you are safer with me. Don't worry about it. Noah nodded, thinking. Then he asked quietly, and Mom, will she go to jail? Ethan paused. How to explain such a difficult situation to a child? Her actions were very bad. People who do this are punished by law. I see. Noah looked down. It's just. She said she was sick, that she needed the money to get better. I wanted Mom to get better. His voice wavered. And then she and Cole said it was necessary so that I wouldn't interfere. Ethan clenched his fists, but asked in a calm voice. They locked you in every day. Almost. Noah whispered. They let him out for a little while sometimes, when Cole went away. Mom was afraid of him too. He screamed, broke dishes. He didn't hit me, he just pushed me. But he threatened that if I told anyone, it would be worse. Ethan felt alternately icy horror and blazing rage as he listened to these revelations. He barely restrained himself from revealing these feelings to his son. He gently stroked Noah's hand. You already told me. Now you are in no danger. I will take care of it. Noah sat up a little on the pillows. You're an engineer, Dad. How will you take care of it? Ethan looked confused for a moment, but then answered confidently, "Profession has nothing to do with it. I am your father, and that means my job is to protect you. And believe me, I can handle it." Noah looked at him searchingly. "I believe," he finally said quietly, and allowed himself to smile again, although the smile was weak. An hour later, the boy fell asleep again, this time more peacefully. Ethan covered him with a blanket, checked that nothing was pressing on the wires connected to the device. It was already late in the night. Ethan exhaled and walked out into the hallway, feeling tired all over. He remembered that he had to tell his parents. Taking out his phone, he dialed Barbara's number. The mother answered almost immediately, as if she had not slept and was waiting for the call. "Ethan, how are you?" Hearing his mother's voice, Ethan suddenly realized how much had happened in one day. A wave of emotion washed over him, but he tried to speak calmly. "We're at the hospital. Noah's alive, Mom. He's in a really bad way, but the doctors say he'll recover." Barbara sobbed with relief. "Thank God. Darling, my heart was not in the right place." "What happened?" Ethan, looking out the window at the lights of the night city, quietly described to his mother the events of the day, how he found Noah, what state he was in, that his mother and her boyfriend were arrested. Barbara listened silently, only occasionally sighing or saying, "Oh my God." "Noah is with me now," Ethan finished. "He will remain in the hospital for a few days, and then, hopefully, they will allow him to leave." "Of course, dear," the mother said firmly. "You did the right thing by going. Poor boy. But now it's all over, all behind us." Ethan paused, then asked, "How is father?" "He's nearby," Barbara answered. "He's very worried. He wants to fly to you tomorrow." "Not yet," Ethan shook his head, though his mother couldn't see it. "Noah is still weak. Let's do it a little later, when he's stronger. I can handle it myself." "Okay? Just remember, we're here to help in any way we can," Barbara said. "If you need money or connections, let me know." "Thank you." Ethan closed his eyes, feeling grateful and tired. "Mom, one more thing. I need a good lawyer here in Texas to make everything official custody and about Noah's money too." "I understand," the mother responded. "I'll ask our family lawyer to find someone locally who specializes in such cases. I'll get to it in the morning." "Thank you," Ethan repeated. "And now, I'm going to try to get some sleep right here in this chair." "Rest, honey," Barbara said softly. "You're a hero today. Hugs, and give Noah a pet for us." "Sure," Ethan smiled wearily. "Good night, Mom." He turned off the call and went back into the room, settling into the chair next to his son's bed. The early dawn was breaking over Austin outside the window. Ethan closed his eyes, feeling the sting of tears. But he knew that a new day and new challenges lay ahead. The next morning, Ethan had barely finished a cup of strong black coffee in the hospital cafeteria when he received a call from an unfamiliar number, Austin. He walked over to the window in the hallway and answered. "Mr. Walker," a female voice said, businesslike but friendly. "This is Amanda Foster, attorney. Your parents have contacted my office. I practice family law in Austin. I was informed of your situation and asked for immediate assistance." Ethan felt relieved. Barbara had wasted no time. "Yes, Miss Foster. Thank you for responding so quickly." "Just call me Amanda," she said. "I've already read the briefing. It's terrible what happened to your son. The main thing is that you saved him. How is Noah now?" "He's stable," Ethan replied. "The doctors say he'll need a few days to recover. I'm with him at the hospital." "I understand. Then, so that you don't have to travel, I can come to you at the hospital to discuss the matter. Is that convenient?" "Yes, of course," Ethan nodded, glancing at the door of the room. "We're at St. David's Children's Hospital in the pediatrics department." "I'll be there in an hour," Amanda assured. "I'll grab all the necessary documents." Exactly an hour later, as promised, Amanda Foster appeared in the hall of the pediatric department. She was a slender woman of about 40, with short, cropped blonde hair and attentive gray eyes. She was dressed in a strict dark blue suit, but instead of heels, she wore comfortable ballet flats, which gave her a more inviting appearance. Ethan met her at the elevator and shook her hand briefly. "Thank you for coming. It's my job, and I admit I'm glad to help in such an important matter," she replied with a slight smile. "Let's sit down somewhere where we won't be disturbed." They found a quiet corner in the family room where there was a sofa and a couple of chairs. There was no one else there. Amanda took a notebook and tablet out of her briefcase. "So, the first and most urgent thing is to ensure that you have legal custody of Noah, at least temporarily, while they sort things out with the mother. I understand that you have already spoken with social services." "Yes," Ethan confirmed. "A CPS worker, Catherine Lewis, came by yesterday. She said the department is willing to release Noah to me for temporary custody, but it needs a court order." Amanda quickly made a note. "Great, that makes it even easier. We can file a petition for emergency temporary guardianship. In fact, it's emergency custody order and emergency guardianship order. The judge can issue this very quickly, given the circumstances. Noah's mother is under arrest now," Ethan added. "I think it'll be hard to argue with her." Amanda nodded. "True. But the procedure is that we still have to officially notify her of the filing and the hearing, even if she's under arrest. The sheriff or a courier will do that. The hearing will most likely be scheduled within a couple of days. However, sometimes judges sign an emergency order ex parte, that is, without the presence of the other party, almost immediately if sufficient evidence of a threat to the child is presented." "We have evidence," Ethan said grimly. "A medical report, a police report on the condition Noah was found in." "Exactly," Amanda confirmed. "I've already requested a hospital discharge summary and a copy of the police report through your parents. I think I'll have them faxed to me by noon." Ethan was surprised by the efficiency. "You have thought of everything." Amanda smiled slightly. "That's just my style of work. Now, the second question, jurisdiction. You live in Colorado, right?" "Yes," Ethan admitted, "but the child lived in Texas this year." Amanda scrolled through something on her tablet. "Where did the original divorce and custody case take place?" "In Colorado, in Denver," he replied. "The court there approved an agreement but gave Madison primary custody and me certain visitation rights." "I see. Then, strictly speaking, the custody changes would have to be approved by a Colorado court unless the case was transferred to Texas. But since the case is an emergency and the child is actually in Texas, the local court may issue temporary measures to protect the child." "Will there be a conflict?" Ethan asked worriedly. "In the future, you may need to transfer jurisdiction to Texas or at least notify the Colorado court of what happened. I can help with that," Amanda assured. "Right now, the main thing is to get a document allowing you to be Noah's legal guardian, at least temporarily." Ethan nodded. It all sounded reasonable. "Also," Amanda continued, "we should discuss limiting Madison's parental rights. Given these circumstances, the judge will likely remove her from any decisions and contact with the child for the duration of the proceedings. Perhaps in the future, the question of completely depriving her of parental rights will arise, but it is too early to talk about that." "It's fine with me," Ethan said harshly. Remembering Noah in that closet, he felt no regret at all at the thought that his mother shouldn't even go near her son now. "I understand your emotions," Amanda said softly, "but try to trust these decisions to the court. I am sure the result will be in your favor." "For the record, we filed for divorce after she cheated on us." "I understand," Amanda nodded. "But for guardianship, this is secondary. The court looks at the child's safety, here and now." She made a few more notes, then looked at Ethan. "Now, regarding the financial part. Your parents mentioned Noah's trust fund, the money from which Madison, as you suspect, used illegally." "I don't just suspect," Ethan shook his head. "I know she did, but I have no proof yet, other than her own casual words and circumstantial evidence." "So we need to get some evidence," Amanda responded. "What is the structure of this fund? Who set it up? Who is the manager? My parents set up the fund when Noah was born, Ethan explained. Technically, it's a trust in his name. The manager is a bank in Denver, but Madison won a court order after the divorce to be a co-manager, arguing that she's the primary caregiver and knows the child's needs. She was allowed access to funds for certain expenses related to Noah on an accountable basis. Amanda frowned. Reporting to whom? As a father, you were supposed to provide reporting. Formally, yes, an annual report on the use of funds, copies for me and my parents, Ethan sighed. But the report for this year has not arrived yet. The deadline is probably late autumn. Besides, I admit, I still have not asked for any detailed statements. Well, let's request an unscheduled report or a transaction statement, Amanda said decisively. Madison's trial may also reveal details, but we won't rely on a criminal investigation alone. I can make a formal request to the bank on your behalf, and if necessary, the court will issue an order to obtain financial records. Ethan felt grateful for her assertiveness. Thank you. I would really like to return this money to Noah if there is still anything to return. Of course, the lawyer nodded. In addition, it might be worth filing claims for damages, but that's later. First, guardianship and security. She looked up from her notes and asked softly, "Are you prepared for the fact that this could be a long process? Court proceedings sometimes last for months." Ethan clenched his fist on his knee, then relaxed it. He remembered his son's weak voice. "Will you take me home forever?" "I'm willing to do anything to make sure Noah is safe and never has to go through anything like this again," he said firmly. Amanda smiled slightly. "Okay, so here's the plan. I'm filing a petition for emergency temporary custody in Austin County Family Court today. I think the judge will sign it ex parte the evening, given the materials we provide. Then we will be scheduled for a full hearing, probably in a week or two." "Will I need to be there in person?" Ethan asked. "Yes, absolutely," she confirmed. "But as you said, you'll stay in town as long as you need to. Besides, Noah will probably be able to travel by then if you want to take him home." "It's clear." "Then," Amanda continued, "I'll start collecting information on the financial issue at the same time. As soon as we have the bank data, we'll assess the scale of the damage. It's possible there's a large sum there, and then the prosecutor's office itself will become interested." "Oh, by the way," Ethan recalled, "the police mentioned new charges. When Noah told me, he said Mom lied about her illness to get money. I think it's a scam." "I agree, it looks very similar," the lawyer chuckled. "They could have been charged with embezzlement of a minor's funds. That's serious. But let's leave that to the prosecutors. If they go to trial, you'll probably be called as a witness. Noah too, although I'll try to avoid that. There's no point in a child being re-traumatized during interrogations." Ethan breathed a sigh of relief. "I wouldn't want him to be dragged through the courts. We'll try to solve everything with documents," Amanda assured. "We have photographs of the conditions in which he was kept, medical reports, your testimony, police statements. That should be enough." She put the notebook aside. "That's all for now. I'll go back to the office now and take care of the paperwork. If I need your signature or clarifications, I'll get in touch. By the way, tomorrow may be the first short hearing on your petition. Then I'll let you know you'll come to court for an hour." Ethan nodded. "Of course, I'll be ready." They stood up. Amanda extended her hand to him. "Hold on, Mr. Walker. The worst is over." "Thank you." Ethan squeezed her hand gratefully. "See you later." After the lawyer left, Ethan stood in the hallway for a few minutes, digesting the conversation. The plan was clear. He had to navigate through bureaucracy and the courts, but now he had professional support. He took a deep breath and let it out. For the first time in a long time, he felt like justice was within his reach, and he would do everything in his power to protect his son and restore his life to normal. 2 days after Noah's rescue, Ethan left the hospital for the first time on an important matter, an emergency hearing on his custody petition in Austin County Family Court. Noah had already been moved from intensive care to a regular room, and the boy was feeling better. Ethan didn't want to leave his son alone, but his grandmother Barbara had flown in from Denver the night before, and she sat by her grandson's bedside, giving Ethan the time to go to court. The small family courtroom, where divorce and alimony disputes were usually decided, was almost empty except for Ethan and his lawyer. Across the court, the defendant's bench was empty. Madison was not present. She had not been brought from jail, and it seemed she did not have a civil attorney. Judge Harris, an elderly man with a tired face, reviewed the materials presented: a medical report from the hospital, a copy of the police report, and a notarized statement from Ethan describing the circumstances that threatened the child's well-being. Amanda Foster spoke clearly and confidently. "Your Honor, this is an exceptional situation. The child was subjected to severe abuse and neglect by the mother, who previously had primary custody. The boy has now been rescued by the father. The mother has been arrested on charges of child abuse. We move that the father, Mr. Walker, be granted immediate temporary sole custody of Noah, and that the mother, Madison Carter, be restrained from approaching or having any contact with the child until further notice." The judge nodded grimly. "Mr. Walker, come here." Ethan stood up and walked to the lectern. "Yes, Your Honor." "Do you confirm the circumstances stated?" the judge asked, looking him straight in the eye over his glasses. "Yes, Your Honor," Ethan answered clearly. "Everything in the file is true. My son is in the hospital now. I was present when he was released." His voice involuntarily trembled at these words, and he fell silent, pulling himself together. The judge's gaze softened slightly. "Thank you. You may sit down." Ethan returned to his seat next to Amanda. Judge Harris leafed through the papers for another second and then announced firmly, "Considering the evidence presented, the court grants the petitioner's motion." Immediately, a determination is made to grant the father, Ethan Walker, sole temporary custody of the minor Noah Walker. The mother, Madison Carter, is temporarily suspended from parental rights during the proceedings. She is prohibited from any contact with the child, including in person, by telephone, electronically, or through third parties. Amanda nodded slightly, taking in every word. Ethan breathed a sigh of relief. Further, the judge continued, "A hearing on the merits of the case is scheduled in 14 days on October 5th at 10 o'clock. Summons will be sent to the parties. At that point, the preliminary hearing is over." "Thank you, Your Honor," Amanda said clearly. The bailiff took the judge's signed order to enter into the database and handed a copy to Amanda. She immediately handed a copy to Ethan. "Congratulations, you are now officially Noah's temporary guardian." Ethan looked at the document, which stated in black and white that he was the only one who could make decisions for his son. It was as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Even if it was temporary, no one could take Noah away from him now. "Thank you, Amanda," he said sincerely. They left the courtroom together. In the courtroom corridor, Amanda called Ethan aside. "I have more news. I got a statement for Noah's trust account for the last year." Ethan became wary. "And what's there?" The lawyer leafed through the printed pages. "According to the bank's data, since Madison gained access to the funds, that is, approximately over the past year, about $120,000 has been spent from the trust." Ethan's eyes widened in shock. $120,000. He knew that initially there were about $200,000 in the fund set aside for his son's future. Was more than half really gone? Most of this money, Amanda continued, was transferred to Mrs. Carter's own accounts or cashed out. The child's intended expenses are minimal: a few school clubs, clothes. The rest are large cash withdrawals and transfers to her personal account. Ethan ran his hand over his face. "It's unbelievable. What did she spend it on?" "We can find out for sure through a subpoena or a financial investigation," Amanda answered. "But we can guess from a couple of details. For example, there is a payment to a car dealer for $30,000. Apparently, a car was purchased. Also, withdrawals of $5,000–10,000 every couple of weeks. It looks like she was just borrowing to live on." Ethan shook his head bitterly, feeling both furious and disappointed. "We saved so much for Noah. This is his future, college, everything." Amanda touched his shoulder sympathetically. I understand. The good news is that there are still about 80,000 left in the account. No one touched them. At least something, Ethan muttered. These funds are currently blocked by the bank until the issue is resolved, the lawyer said. I contacted the trustee. As soon as they found out about what was happening, they suspended all operations. That's right, Ethan nodded. So, what's next? Can we get back what was stolen? Amanda narrowed her eyes. We will try. But I am afraid that she could have spent the lion's share irretrievably. It is not a fact that she still has these amounts on hand. Perhaps the car can be sued or sold if it was bought in Noah's name or in her name. She bought an SUV, Ethan suddenly remembered. Last December, bragging to a friend on the phone, thinking I wouldn't hear. I was surprised where she got the money. She said she got a used car on credit. And it turns out that's how it is. That's a valuable fact, Amanda noted. We'll remember that for the court. Ethan clutched the copy of the court order in his hand. Amanda, can this transaction data be given to the investigator who is conducting the criminal case against them? This is fraud. I'm already thinking about it, the lawyer replied. We can notify the prosecutor's office. By the way, the district attorney called me just this morning. They're drawing up charges. They wanted to know if you'd cooperate. Of course, Ethan nodded. I'm ready to give any testimony. Excellent. I will give them the financial findings once we have it properly formalized. Perhaps they will add a separate point to the charges theft or fraud. Ethan smiled bitterly. They deserved every accusation that could be leveled. I have no doubt, Amanda sighed. But at least now we have the assurance that Noah is with you and safe. The court's order is a guarantee of that. Ethan nodded. They were already outside the courthouse, out into the warm Texas sun. He squinted against the light, as if seeing the world around him anew. Shall I drive you back to the hospital? Amanda offered, gesturing toward the parking lot. That would be nice, Ethan smiled tiredly. As they settled into her car, Ethan asked, Do you think Madison will try to fight in court? Does she even have a chance to challenge the custody? Amanda started the engine and answered, looking ahead. Frankly, her chances are minimal. With such baggage, a criminal case, obvious evidence of abuse, no sane court will return her child. Most likely, her parental rights will be significantly limited or even terminated. Perhaps her lawyers will advise not to make things worse. I see. Ethan looked out the window at the streets rushing by. His emotions were warring inside him. On the one hand, he was glad for this certainty. He would be able to protect his son forever. On the other hand, the question remained, how could Noah's mother go so far? What drove her to such a betrayal of her own child? Amanda, as if reading his thoughts, said quietly, Sometimes good people do terrible things under pressure from circumstances or other people. That's not an excuse, but... She didn't finish her sentence, but Ethan got the hint. Cole Hart must have played a big role. Cole, he said. I think he was the one pulling the strings, although Madison is responsible too. Of course, the lawyer nodded. However, since they are in cahoots, both will be responsible. For the money and for the child. They fell silent. Half an hour later, the car pulled up to the hospital. Thanks for the ride, Ethan said as he said goodbye to Amanda. You're welcome. I'm available, as always, she replied. Take a rest today, you deserve it. In the meantime, I'll prepare for the main hearing. Although I suspect there won't be anything complicated there. Ethan nodded. See you. He felt a strange sense of emptiness as he watched the lawyer's car disappear around the corner. Yes, he had taken a huge step today, securing his right to defend his son. But there were still battles ahead, a trial in 2 weeks, then perhaps a long process against Madison and Cole. He went up to the ward. Barbara, seeing him, immediately stood up to greet him. Well, how did it go? Noah looked questioningly too. Ethan smiled at them both. Everything is fine. The court gave Noah into my custody. Now he will officially live with me. Barbara let out a soft gasp of joy and Noah smiled faintly and leaned back against the pillow in relaxation. "So home," he whispered. "Yes, son, home," Ethan confirmed, sitting down next to him and putting his arm around his shoulders. For the first time, he said the word without looking back, knowing that ahead of them there really would be a new home, a safe one, where Noah would no longer be in danger. Exactly 2 weeks after the emergency hearing, Noah's main custody hearing took place as scheduled. Much had changed in the interim. Noah had grown strong enough that Ethan had brought him home from the hospital not to Denver, but to a rented apartment in Austin, so he could be close to the trial. Barbara stayed with them, helping to care for Noah. Both sides were present in the courtroom this time. Ethan sat next to Amanda at the plaintiff's table. Across from her, at the defendant's table, was Madison Carter, handcuffed and escorted by a guard. A court-appointed attorney stood next to her. Madison looked haggard. She had lost a lot of weight in the 2 weeks in the lockup. Her hair was pulled back carelessly. She barely looked up. Judge Harris began the hearing by summarizing the matter. Today, we are considering the merits of Ethan Walker's claim to revise the guardianship of minor Noah Walker due to extraordinary circumstances. The court previously temporarily transferred guardianship to the plaintiff. He turned his gaze to Madison's side. "Mrs. Carter, do you accept the plaintiff's claims? Will you challenge the transfer of custody to the father?" The lawyer sitting next to Madison leaned toward her and asked her something quietly. She nervously crumpled the edge of her orange prison uniform in her fingers. Then, without looking up, her voice trembled. "I admit." Her defender confirmed louder. "Your Honor, the defendant agrees to the demands. We do not challenge the transfer of sole custody to the child's father." There was a moment of silence. Ethan felt Barbara, sitting behind him in the room, let out a quiet sigh of relief. The judge nodded. "In that case, let's move on to making a decision." Amanda stood up. "Your Honor, let me briefly outline our proposals regarding the guardianship order." "Please," the judge allowed. "The plaintiff requests that he, Ethan Walker, be appointed as the sole guardian and trustee of Noah Walker, with full parental authority to make decisions regarding the child's upbringing, place of residence, education, and medical treatment. The defendant, Madison Carter, voluntarily waives her rights to the child until the situation improves. We also ask the court to limit her contact with the child, at the discretion of the father, exclusively in the form of written correspondence, and only if Noah's psychological state allows it. At this point, no visit seems safe for the child due to the trauma he has suffered. The judge looked at Madison's lawyer. "Do you agree with these conditions?" He stood up. "Yes, Your Honor. My client realizes that she has committed a grave act. At this stage, she will not ask for visits. The only request is to leave her the opportunity in the future, after serving her sentence and subject to correction, to apply to the court with a petition for the restoration of at least partial rights, if this is in the interests of the child." Ethan snorted softly at the words. Amanda touched his arm comfortingly under the table, signaling him not to interfere. Judge Harris frowned but answered neutrally. "The court takes note of this reservation. The decision on any future motions will depend on the circumstances at that time." He picked up the papers lying in front of him. "So, the court rules, to satisfy the plaintiff's claims in full, custody of Noah Walker is transferred to the father, Ethan Walker, on a permanent basis. The mother, Madison Carter, is suspended from performing parental duties. She is prohibited from communicating with the child, except in cases where the guardian, that is, the father himself, deems it possible. This decision is subject to immediate execution." The blow of the hammer sealed the deal. Ethan closed his eyes for a second. It was over. Noah was now officially and irrevocably under his protection. The judge was already getting up, but suddenly Madison spoke up. "Your Honor, may I say something?" Her lawyer turned to her in surprise, but the judge made a gesture of permission. Briefly, Madison stood up, her cuffed hand shaking. She turned to face Ethan. It was the first time their eyes had met throughout the entire meeting. Madison's eyes were red and teary. "Ethan," she began in a hoarse whisper, I can't be forgiven. I did something terrible. To our boy, I'm not asking you to understand or forgive me. Just know, I really loved Noah. Her voice broke, but she continued, sobbing. I lost my mind. Cole. He convinced me that it would be better this way, that you abandoned us, that there was no justice. I didn't have the strength to stop. I'm sorry. Ethan sat huddled, anger and bitter pity warring in his chest. He looked at this broken woman, the one he had once loved and raised his son with, and barely recognized her. Madison was crying openly, not bothering to wipe her tears, as if nothing mattered anymore. The judge broke the silence with a muffled voice. Mrs. Carter, the court is not a place for personal reconciliations. You have spoken. Ethan, do you have anything to say? All eyes turned to him. Ethan stood up, feeling a lump in his throat. He looked at Madison. Finally, quietly but firmly, he said, I appreciate you saying that. The most important thing for Noah right now is to recover. I hope that someday you will understand all the pain you caused and make amends for it. At least in part. Madison covered her face with her hands, sobbing. Her lawyer gently put his arm around her shoulders and sat her down. I declare the hearing closed, Judge Harris concluded and left the courtroom. The guards approached Madison. She kept her head down and headed for the exit under guard, not even looking back. Barbara burst into tears of relief as she hugged her son in the hallway. Now you are free of her, thank God. Poor woman, but God is my witness, it would be better for Noah not to see her. Ethan was silent. He felt empty and relieved at the same time. Everything had ended exactly as it should. Amanda said goodbye to them at the exit. Congratulations, Ethan. Even though the circumstances are terrible, you now have every opportunity to give your son a normal life. If you need anything, you know where to find me. Thank you for everything, Amanda, he replied sincerely, shaking her hand. Take care of Noah, the lawyer smiled. Of course, Ethan nodded. He, Barbara, and Noah returned home together. On the way, Noah asked quietly, Dad, did Mom cry a lot? Ethan winced slightly, hoping his son wouldn't hear. Apparently, he understood something from their faces. Yes, she cried, he answered honestly. Did she apologize? Noah asked forcefully. Ethan met his gaze in the car's rearview mirror. She asked. She said she loves you. Noah turned to the window. Barbara patted him on the shoulder. Bunny, we won't let anyone hurt you anymore, okay? The boy nodded silently, clinging to his grandmother. Ethan focused on the road. There was no anger left in his soul, only weariness and determination to keep going for his son. They had won this battle. There was a long road to healing ahead, but now they could walk it together. 6 months after the final custody trial, the day came when Madison Carter and Cole Hart were sentenced. The criminal case against them was being tried in district court. Both defendants, on the advice of their attorneys, entered plea deals and pleaded guilty to most of the charges: aggravated injury to a child and fraudulent misappropriation of funds from a minor. This avoided a lengthy jury trial, but the judge had to determine the punishment. Ethan came to the sentencing with his father and mother. They decided not to take Noah. At 9 years old, he had already been through too much, and he did not need to see his parents in the dock. The boy remained at home with his maternal grandmother, who, having learned of what had happened, came to help and visit her grandson. In the courtroom, Madison and Cole sat separately, each with their own lawyer. Both were wearing prison jumpsuits. Cole was handcuffed at the waist, like a dangerous criminal. He looked sullen and angry, while Madison looked broken, her shoulders slumped, her eyes dull. The judge, a stern middle-aged woman named Rodriguez, announced, Today the court will issue a verdict in the case of the state of Texas against Cole Hart and Madison Carter. She listed the basic facts: how the defendants, as responsible adults, intentionally tortured and starved a minor, Noah Walker, and defrauded the child of money, thereby causing physical and emotional harm. When the judge invited the victim's side to speak, Ethan stood up. His throat was dry, but he knew he had to say it, for Noah and for himself. He walked to the center of the room, feeling eyes on him. Cole looked away coldly, and Madison froze. not daring to look up at Ethan. "My name is Ethan Walker," he began quietly but clearly. "I am Noah Walker's father. My son is not here today, but I wish to speak on his behalf." He felt a lump in his throat, but forced himself to continue speaking. Noah trusted his mother. He loved her and believed in her, and she betrayed that trust in the most horrible way. Together with her accomplice, they used the money they had set aside for their son's future for their own whims. They didn't care that the child was suffering as long as they satisfied their needs, and they didn't care about him. Ethan's voice rang with emotion, tears welling up in his eyes. "I can't tell you the horror my son went through. No amount of punishment can undo the damage he's suffered. He still asks me if his mother will come back to take him away again." Ethan paused, taking a breath, and continued more quietly, "As a father, I couldn't protect my child then, but I will do everything I can to protect him now and in the future." He straightened up, trying to regain some firmness in his voice. "I ask the court to take into account all the cruelty and cold-bloodedness of these actions when passing the sentence. They must bear full responsibility so that no one else would think of doing this to defenseless children." When he finished, Ethan returned to his seat, feeling himself shaking. Barbara gently squeezed his hand, and his father, sitting next to him, nodded proudly. It was the defense's turn. Cole's attorney said something about his client's difficult childhood and gambling addiction, but the judge listened with a stony face. Madison's attorney noted that his client had pleaded guilty and cooperated with the investigation, and that she herself had been under pressure from an accomplice and suffered from mental illness. But these words hung in the air without any apparent sympathy from the court. Finally, Judge Rodriguez announced the verdict. "Cole Hart, stand up." Cole stood up, his chin jutting out in defiance. The judge looked at him sternly. "Taking into account your guilty plea and the particular cruelty of the crime, the court sentences you to 15 years of imprisonment in a state correctional facility with a right to parole no earlier than after serving 2/3 of the term." Cole just twitched the corner of his mouth, not saying a word. "Madison Carter, please stand up," the judge continued. Madison rose unsteadily, barely keeping her balance. "Taking into account your guilty plea, the absence of previous convictions and cooperation with the investigation, the court sentences you to 8 years of imprisonment. The possibility of parole is not earlier than half of the term. In addition, both defendants are jointly obligated to pay compensation to the victim, your son, in the amount of $120,000, corresponding to the amount of the unlawfully spent funds from the trust fund." The judge paused, looking around the room. "I hope that the long time you will spend in prison will allow you to realize the full gravity of your actions. At this point, the meeting is declared closed." She banged the hammer. The guards immediately led them to the convicts. Cole suddenly burst into curses. "It's all a lie. I don't give a damn about your sentence." He lunged, but 2 guards twisted his arms and quickly led him away. Madison stood there, pale and silent, tears streaming down her cheeks. As she passed, her gaze met Ethan's. He didn't look away. Madison whispered with trembling lips, "I'm sorry," and she, too, was led away. There was silence in the hall. Ethan felt relief. The trial was over, the guilty were punished. But there was still bitterness in his soul. No amount of time would bring back those months of suffering for Noah. The prosecutor, a young man with glasses, approached the Walker family after the hearing. "Mr. Walker, thank you for your cooperation. Your presentation helped to convey the position to the court." Ethan nodded wearily. "I hope it was worth it." "Certainly," the prosecutor shook his hand. "I wish your son a speedy recovery. If anything happens, contact me." When the prosecutor left, Barbara hugged her son. "It's all over, dear." "Yes, Mom," Ethan breathed. Ethan's father, David, clapped his son on the shoulder. "You're doing well. Now we have to move on with our lives." Ethan smiled sadly. "Live on." "Yes." He looked out the window at the sunny courtyard. Somewhere out there ahead, there really was life after all this. "Let's go home," he quietly said to his parents. They nodded. The family headed towards the exit, leaving the cold walls of justice behind. For Ethan and Noah, a new beginning was coming without fear, without lies, with faith in the future. A few more months passed. Ethan and Noah returned to Denver and gradually built a new, quiet life. At first, Ethan took a leave of absence from work to devote himself entirely to his son. They lived in a cozy house in a quiet neighborhood where Grandma Barbara and Grandpa David often visited. The family surrounded Noah with care and love, trying to heal invisible wounds. One summer night was especially warm. Ethan put Noah to bed in his room, wishing him good night. The boy was already attending the local school and catching up on the classes he had missed with the help of tutors. He quickly caught up with his class. During the day, Noah seemed almost like a normal, cheerful child. He ran around the yard, went fishing with his grandfather, rode his bike down the street with a smile. But the nights were still a difficult time. Ethan had already dozed off in his room when he suddenly heard a soft crying coming from the nursery. He immediately got up and hurried to his son. Noah was sitting up in bed, clutching a teddy bear to his chest, crying and sobbing. "Noah, honey, what happened?" Ethan sat down next to him, hugging him. The boy buried his face in his shoulder. "I dreamed that I was there again, locked up, alone." His thin shoulders shook. "Hush, hush," Ethan whispered, stroking his son's back. "It's just a dream. You're home with Daddy. I'm here." Noah sobbed for a few more minutes, then his breathing became more even. He pulled away and looked at Ethan. "Are you sure you won't go anywhere?" Ethan's heart sank. He had heard this question dozens of times before. "Nowhere, son. I'll always be there. I promise." Noah nodded and hesitated before asking. "And Grandma Maddie, will she always be where she is now?" Ethan realized that they were talking about Madison. He answered carefully. "Mom is in prison, and she won't get out for years. You don't have to worry about that." Noah looked down. "I don't want to see her. But sometimes I remember what she was like before Cole. She was good, wasn't she?" Ethan sighed heavily. It was a difficult topic, but the psychologist advised him to answer honestly, without denigration, but also without justification. "Mom used to love you in her own way, but she did unforgivable things. Unfortunately, people change. The main thing to remember is that none of this is your fault." The boy nodded and quietly hugged his father. "I know. Dr. Marie says so too." Dr. Marie was a child psychologist that Ethan took Noah to see every week. She helped him cope with the trauma. "She's right," Ethan confirmed, kissing his son on the top of his head. "Now let's try to sleep again. I'll sit with you as long as you need." "Okay," Noah whispered. Ethan stayed by the bed until his son fell into a peaceful sleep again, then quietly left, closing the door. He went down to the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water. Sleepless nights had become a normal part of his life, but he didn't complain. The main thing was that Noah was safe and slowly recovering. On the table next to the couch lay the morning paper that David had left earlier in the day. Ethan glanced absently at the headlines and suddenly froze. The front page read, "Two children found in Houston suburb after long-term deprivation." Ethan's hands shook as he read the details. Anger and pain grew in his chest. Two other children had gone through a similar hell. It was as if he saw Noah's children in their place. Luckily, they had been snatched away in time, too. Ethan put the newspaper down, trying to calm down. But his thoughts were already racing. There were many such cases. He learned this from social workers and from the news. Hundreds, thousands of children suffer from parental neglect, and there is not always someone nearby who will notice and save them in time. He remembered the conversation he had with Catherine Lewis of Texas CPS when she said goodbye to him. "Take care of Noah. Not everyone's story ends as well as yours," she had said. Ethan had been preoccupied with his own concerns, but now he understood the depth of her words. Sitting down at the kitchen table, he opened his laptop. An idea had occurred to him, vague but persistent. He began searching the internet for organizations that helped children who had been victims of abuse and neglect. There were mentions of charities, government programs, and hotlines. But how many of them directly helped children recover from their experiences or prevented similar incidents? Ethan found a website for a national foundation that published stories of rescued children. He read several similar horror stories, and in all of them, someone had failed to notice the warning signs in time. He came across statistics, the number of cases of child abuse detected per year. The numbers horrified him. Closing his laptop, Ethan was determined. He couldn't stand by. His family had almost lost Noah, but they were lucky enough to save him. And how many children go unnoticed? Ethan felt a desire to use his experience and resources to help others. The next day, taking advantage of the opportunity, he discussed his idea with his parents over morning coffee. "I want to do something for kids like Noah," he admitted. "Maybe start a foundation or an outreach program. Support families, make sure this doesn't happen to others." Barbara looked at her son with warmth. "It's a noble wish, dear. But are you sure you're ready to dive into this topic again? You and Noah have only just begun to feel better." Ethan nodded. "I thought about it. But precisely because we went through it and got out, I feel an obligation to help others. I have knowledge, I have connections now, and a huge motivation." David took a sip of coffee. "Well, we will support you. I can involve some businessmen I know. Maybe someone will want to invest in charity, and we will help you financially, you know." "Thanks, Dad. But I'm not sure about the form yet. Maybe I should start with a little initiative." Barbara smiled. "The main thing is, don't do it at the expense of Noah. He still needs you the most." "That goes without saying," Ethan said softly. "Noah always comes first. Last night, I realized again." He shook his head, remembering his son's tears. "But if I can do anything along the way to prevent someone else's misfortune or help someone else's child get back to normal, I have to try." The parents nodded in agreement. That same day, Ethan called Amanda Foster and laid out his thoughts. The lawyer was inspired. "You know, Ethan, your experience is unique. You could speak at child protection forums, share your story, and attract attention." "I'm not a great speaker," he admitted sheepishly. "More of a practitioner. But I'm ready to tell you things if it's useful." "Of course it will be useful," Amanda assured. "And I will help with the legal side of organizing the fund." Ethan thanked her. For the first time in a long time, he felt a new energy within him, as if he had a purpose beyond his own family. A purpose driven by grief and a desire that no child should ever suffer from being forgotten by their loved ones. This is how a project was born that was meant to give hope to other disadvantaged children. After a few weeks of preparation, Ethan's idea began to take shape. Amanda Foster helped draw up the legal documents to register the nonprofit. Ethan decided to call it New Hope, a name that reflected the essence of the mission: to give children who have suffered from parental neglect new hope for a normal life. 5 people gathered in a small conference room at the local library. Ethan, Amanda, Catherine Lewis from Texas CPS, whom Ethan had brought in as a consultant, child psychologist Marie, the same one who had worked with Noah, and an old friend of Ethan's named Mark, who worked in it. It was the first meeting of the New Hope Action Group. There was a board on the wall covered in markers, outlines of the project's goals. Ethan stood at the board and spoke, looking around the team. "So, our mission is to help children who have experienced severe parental neglect and violence return to normal life, and also to try to prevent such cases where possible." Amanda added, "We registered the fund. I prepared the charter. All that remains is to define specific programs and start looking for funding." Catherine, a social worker, raised her hand. "Can I make a suggestion? It would be good to establish interaction with schools and pediatricians. They are often the first to notice signs of trouble, but they do not always know how to react." Ethan nodded. "Right. In Noah's case, the school noticed too late. I thought about it. We could create a warning system. Mark, tell us your ideas." Mark, a fit man in his 30s, leaned forward. "Ethan and I have discussed it. The idea is to develop software, or at least a database, where schools could enter warning signs frequent truancy, a sharp deterioration in a child's condition, signs of malnutrition. This information could be automatically transmitted to social services or our foundation for verification. Catherine smiled. This is very interesting. Many districts do not have enough people to monitor every school. Automation would help to highlight critical cases. Psychologist Marie added softly. And with those children who have already been rescued and removed from their families, you need to work for a long time. They often need psychological rehabilitation, support from mentors. Exactly, Ethan said. That's why the second block is a mentor and psychologist program. We could gather volunteers or pay specialists so that every child who goes through something like this isn't left alone with their trauma. Amanda took notes. You can try to get funding for this through grants or donations. By the way, Barbara and David, she smiled at Ethan, have already made a generous contribution to the start. Ethan smiled. His parents had donated a sizable amount to the foundation in lieu of a wedding anniversary gift. Yes, we have a small startup capital. I also plan to attract public attention to tell my story publicly if necessary, so that people understand the problem. Catherine suggested. You can organize a seminar or a round table with the participation of the police, social services, doctors, where you will speak. Such personal stories have a strong influence on the audience. Marie nodded. And potential sponsors, too. If your performance gets into the press, it's quite possible that philanthropists will respond. Amanda flipped through her notebook. I've already contacted a local TV station. They're ready to do a story for National Child Abuse Prevention Month. Ethan, you're going to have to do an interview. Ethan felt a thrill at the thought of the cameras, but he said firmly, if it is necessary, I will give it. For the sake of the matter, I am ready to talk about our history. They continued to exchange ideas. A couple of hours later, a plan for the coming months was posted on the board. Official launch of the New Hope Foundation. Press release and media coverage of Noah's story and the Foundation's mission. Developing a prototype alert system for schools. Mark was responsible for this. Recruitment of volunteer mentors and partnership with child psychologists. Maria took on the responsibility of liaising with the professional community. Establishing contacts with CPS departments in several counties to collaborate. Catherine helped with her influence here. Conducting the first workshop on identifying and preventing parental neglect. Amanda and Ethan co-organized. As the meeting came to an end, Ethan looked at the team. Thank you all. A year ago, I couldn't imagine doing something like this. But now I feel it's right. If we can save at least one child from what Noah went through, then our work will not have been in vain. We'll save a lot more, Catherine said confidently, shaking his hand. We have a great team and a goal, Marie added. I'm sure we can do it. Amanda closed her laptop. Well then, let's get to work. We have a lot of work ahead of us. The participants exchanged excited smiles as they left. Ethan paused for a moment, looking at the board filled with ideas. A feeling akin to the one he had felt when he had first saved Noah flared up in his chest. A sense of rightness and determination. Now his personal tragedy was turning into a force capable of changing the fates of other children for the better. A few months after the launch of New Hope, the first results appeared. Noah's story, told by Ethan in the local media, caused a wide resonance. Volunteers and donors reached out to the foundation. Teachers, doctors, and simply caring people began to contact the hotline that the foundation organized to ask for advice or report alarming cases. One day, a teacher from a small town near Austin called New Hope. She quietly told them that she had a student, a 7-year-old girl, who had recently started coming to school dirty, very thin, and often with dark circles under her eyes. The teacher had seen a report about Noah and decided to trust the foundation. Ethan took that call personally. He felt a familiar unease as he listened to the teacher's halting voice. You did the right thing by calling, he said soothingly. We'll contact your local CPS and help you any way we can. Catherine Lewis got involved immediately. At her request, social workers and the police visited the address the teacher had given them. There, they found the girl and her younger brother living in unsanitary conditions with virtually no care. The parents were drug addicts and were doing little to look after their children. Within hours of the call, both children were removed from the family and taken to hospital for examination. That same night, Catherine called Ethan. "The children are safe. The doctor said they were severely malnourished, but they would be fine. A little more and something irreparable could have happened. It's good that your teacher raised the alarm." Ethan closed his eyes in relief. "Thank you, Catherine, and give that teacher my thanks. She saved their lives." "Absolutely," Catherine responded. "Your foundation is already making a real difference, Ethan. I'm proud to be involved." As Ethan hung up the phone, he felt tears well up in his eyes, this time from joy. One child saved was worth fighting for. The next day, Ethan and psychologist Marie visited the hospital where the rescued children had been placed in coordination with CPS. 7-year-old Hannah and her 5-year-old brother James were initially timid around strangers. But Marie quickly found a way to warm up to them, bringing coloring books and crayons. Ethan brought each of them a stuffed animal. "Hello, Hannah," he said softly, sitting down next to the girl in the children's hospital chair. "Ethan is calling me. This is Teddy Bear, and he's yours now." The girl took the teddy bear with distrust and hugged it. Something like a smile appeared in her big eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Little James also grabbed the gifted bunny tightly and hid behind Marie's back. Ethan continued quietly. "You and your brother are great. Everything will be fine now, I promise. There are many good things ahead for you." Hannah nodded, petting the bear. Marie smiled at Ethan. Contact had been made. As they left the room, Ethan let out a heavy breath. The image of a frightened girl, so similar to Noah on that terrible day, was before his eyes. "They'll cope," Marie said confidently. "We'll help them." "Yes," Ethan nodded. "We'll help." Soon, the local newspaper wrote about the story, keeping the children anonymous. The article was titled, "A Lesson in Caring: How a Teacher and Charitable Donors Saved 2 Babies." For New Hope, this was confirmation that the path they had chosen was the right one. The number of requests grew, and more schools expressed interest in collaborating. Mark was finishing a pilot version of the alert system, and several Texas school districts agreed to test it. 6 months after its founding, the New Hope Foundation held its first open seminar on preventing child disadvantage. Social workers, teachers, police officers, psychologists, and simply concerned parents gathered in the city center. Ethan, nervously, went to the podium in front of an audience of 100 people. He began his speech with a simple truth. "A year ago, I couldn't even imagine that I would be standing here. Then my only child was in the hospital, saved from a terrible situation." Ethan spoke about what Noah had gone through, about the signs that were visible, but which no one paid attention to in time. The audience listened silently. Many did not hide their tears. We are not omnipotent and cannot solve all the problems at once. But if we join forces, teachers, doctors, neighbors, law enforcement, philanthropists, and are attentive to the children around us, we have a chance to prevent tragedies. At the end of his speech, the hall exploded with applause. People came up to Ethan, shook his hand, thanked him for his frankness. Several teachers from other cities asked him to help them set up similar programs in their cities. A representative of a large company, touched by the speech, promised sponsorship support for the foundation. Late in the evening, closing the door of the foundation's office, Ethan felt pleasantly tired. Amanda approached him, smiling. "Well, President, it's time to celebrate success." Ethan laughed. "What kind of president am I? Just a father who doesn't want other children to suffer." "That's the kind of father that should lead," Amanda replied seriously. "You're doing a great job, Ethan." He shrugged his shoulders, embarrassed. "We do it all together." "Okay, modest," she winked. "Go home and give Noah a hug. He can be proud of his dad, too." At home, Noah was waiting for Ethan. He did not go to bed. He rushed to his father. "Well, did everything go well?" "Excellent," Ethan smiled, picking up his son, who was already a bit heavy. "It's all thanks to you, champ." Why me? The boy was surprised. For having you. You're my hero, Ethan said seriously. A satisfied smile spread across Noah's cheeks. Barbara, who had been watching the scene from the living room, secretly wiped away a tear of joy. That night, Ethan laid Noah down and stroked his head, thinking that at last there was lasting peace in their lives, and tomorrow would bring new worries, kind worries for those who needed help. And this filled his heart with a quiet happiness. 2 years have passed. The New Hope Foundation has grown from a local initiative into a well-known regional organization. Thanks to the active work of the team led by Ethan, dozens of children across Texas have been saved and helped. The project has been written about in newspapers, and the story has appeared on national television. One spring evening, Ethan stood on the stage of Denver City Hall. Several hundred people, philanthropists, government officials, journalists had gathered in the hall. The city's mayor was presenting him with the honorary Community Service Award, recognizing his contributions to protecting children. Noah sat in the front row with his grandparents, beaming with pride. Amanda, who had flown in from Austin to support her friend, was in the audience too, smiling understatedly as a lawyer should. Next to her sat Catherine, who had come by invitation. The mayor shook Ethan's hand and stepped back, letting him speak. Ethan looked around, holding the glass statue. Making speeches wasn't what he'd started all this for, but he couldn't say no to the city. I am very touched by this honor, he began, his voice shaking slightly, but he quickly overcame his emotion. But I must say, this award does not belong to me alone. He motioned for Amanda, Catherine, Marie, Mark, his entire team present for the evening to rise. To applause, Ethan's friends climbed onto the stage and stood next to him. Without these wonderful people, Ethan continued, none of this would have happened. Each of them put their hearts into our common cause. And of course, he looked out at Noah, I am grateful to my son. His courage to endure difficult trials inspired me to act. Noah flushed, but his eyes were shining with happiness. The audience applauded. Ethan picked up the statuette. Let this award be a reminder that any, even the most terrible, ordeal can be turned into good. We will continue to work as long as at least one child suffers from violence and neglect. Thank you to everyone who is with us. The applause continued for several minutes. Ethan, hugging his colleagues on stage, felt Noah approach him. The boy ran from the audience onto the stage, not holding back his emotions, and hugged his father tightly. Ethan laughed through the tears and lifted his son into his arms, although he was already 11, a bit heavy, but at that moment he was weightless. Photographers rushed to capture the moment. A father with a beaming face and a laughing son in his arms, a living symbol of the triumph of love and hope over the pain of the past. That evening, family and friends celebrated in a small restaurant. Toasts were made at the table. To Ethan, the man with the biggest heart, Barbara proclaimed, raising her glass of juice. Everyone had decided to skip the alcohol so Noah would feel like part of the party. For the whole team, Ethan corrected, taking a bite of the celebratory pie. And for our charges, may they grow up happy. Noah, gobbling up his second ice cream, suddenly said seriously, I want to help the foundation too, Dad. When I grow up, can I? Everyone laughed sweetly, and Ethan stroked his son's head. Of course you can, my dear. You are already helping by your example. Late that night, driving home, Noah fell asleep in the back seat of the car. Holding his award, the mayor had given him a small souvenir, a Medal of Valor, after learning his story. Ethan looked in the mirror at his son's peacefully sleeping face and felt complete peace. A long, happy life awaited them, in which the past remained only a shadow that gave rise to the light of hope for many others. A few more years passed almost unnoticed. Noah grew into a tall, independent young man. Thanks to his family's efforts and support, he studied well, became interested in biology, and dreamed of becoming a doctor. He said that he wanted to treat children, as he had once been treated. In June, under the bright sun, the graduation ceremony was held on the school's green stadium. Among the graduates stood 18-year-old Noah Walker, wearing a blue robe and a square cap. When his name was announced among the class's top students, Ethan felt his heart jump with pride. He, Barbara, and David were sitting in the visiting bleachers. Barbara couldn't stop wiping away happy tears, and David clapped so loudly that he drew sideways smiles from his neighbors. After receiving his diploma, Noah beamed at the podium, looking for his father. Ethan gave him a thumbs up, grinning from ear to ear. In response, his son raised his fist in victory. That small moment, that look of mutual pride and love, was more valuable to Ethan than any honorary statue. After the ceremony, they had a family celebration at home. Close friends gathered in the backyard. Amanda flew in especially, although she grumbled humorously that she felt like an old aunt next to Noah, who had grown up. Catherine sent her congratulations via video call, since she was busy with work in Austin. Mark and Marie also came with gifts. On a long table under an awning, Noah's favorite dishes were laid out. The teenager, almost a man, now accepted congratulations, blushing from the attention but glowing with happiness. "Guys, isn't it too much of a fuss because of me?" He tried to protest as Barbara handed him a huge pie she had baked with the words, "Congratulations, Noah," written on it. "Shut up, birthday boy, and eat the pie," the grandmother said sternly, wiping away her tears. Everyone laughed. When it was time for toasts, Ethan took the floor. He raised his glass of lemonade. "Dear son, today we celebrate your achievement finishing school. But for me, it is more important to see what a wonderful person you have grown into. Kind, strong, smart. You overcame the difficulties that befell you and did not become embittered, but on the contrary decided to devote yourself to helping others." Noah's eyes sparkled. The others listened in silence, many with smiles. Ethan continued. "I once promised myself to do everything to make you happy and safe. Today, looking at you, I can say we did it. You make yourself and us happy. I am infinitely proud of you." "For Noah, to Noah," the guests repeated in chorus, raising their glasses. Noah thanked everyone sheepishly. Then, seizing the moment when the adults were distracted by food, he walked away with Ethan to the side, under the old oak tree, in the shade of which they once loved to read fairy tales. "Dad," the young man began quietly, "can I tell you?" Of course, Ethan raised his eyebrows in surprise. Noah looked him straight in the eyes. "Thank you. For everything. If it weren't for you," he didn't finish, but Ethan understood. He put his arm around his son's shoulders. "You know, I was just doing what I had to do, loving you and saving you. Any father would have done the same." Noah shook his head. "Unfortunately, not just anyone. I'm very lucky to have you." Ethan's throat tightened. He only held his son tighter. "I'm lucky too, son. You're the best thing in my life." They stood in silence for a few moments, understanding each other without words. Then Noah smiled cheerfully. "Okay, that's it. Otherwise, we're going to start crying like grandmas. Let's go throw the ball. I'll show you what I learned on the basketball team." Ethan laughed, shaking off the emotions that had washed over him. "Come on, athlete. Just don't beat me too much. I'll be embarrassed in front of my colleagues later." "No way, you're a hero," Noah winked. Ethan pretended not to hear the word hero. He knew that the real hero for Noah had always been inside Noah himself, the little boy who had endured the darkness and waited for the light. They tossed the ball around under the evening sky, their son's laughter echoing across the yard, mixing with the crickets. Life went on, and Noah had a new journey ahead of him: college, adulthood. But Ethan no longer feared for him as he once had. They had both learned to believe in goodness and in themselves. Watching Noah effortlessly throw the ball into the hoop, Ethan felt a quiet joy. They had done it. Together. August. The engine of a fully loaded SUV hummed in front of the Walker's house. Noah was packing his last suitcase into the trunk. Tomorrow he would move into a dorm at the University of Colorado, where he planned to study pediatrics. Ethan stood on the porch, watching his son. His chest was filled with pride and a little sadness at parting. But these emotions were normal for any parent sending a child off into adulthood. Nothing alarming, just a light sadness and joy for Noah. "That's it, I think," Noah said, slamming the trunk lid. He walked over to his father. "We're leaving in an hour. We need to say goodbye." Barbara and David had already hugged their grandson, telling him to call every day. Grandma handed him a bag of homemade cookies for the first time until you get used to the dorm food. Grandpa was holding back his tears no less than Grandma, although he tried to hide them behind jokes. Now it was Ethan's turn. He put his hands on his son's shoulders and looked into those already adult brown eyes. "Well, the time has come to let you go free. I won't be here for long, Dad," Noah smiled. "I'll be back for the holidays in a couple of months." "I know," Ethan nodded, swallowing. "It's just, you're my only one. You've gotten used to being around me for so many years." Noah hugged him tightly. "And I got used to it. But never mind, you now have a bunch of children under your care in the foundation. You'll be able to babysit them." Ethan laughed through the moisture in his eyes. "Well said. I'll visit our guys more often so I don't get bored." Noah pulled away and suddenly became serious. "I wanted to tell you something before I left. You know, the other day I received a letter from my mother." Ethan nodded. He knew Madison had been paroled a year ago and was trying to make contact. Noah hadn't been ready before, but he had recently asked to see her latest letter. "I read it," Noah continued calmly. "She was very apologetic and asked for a chance to talk someday. You know, I decided I didn't want to go with the burden of resentment. I wrote her a response." Ethan's heart began to pound. "Is it true?" "Yes, I wrote that." Noah looked away toward the yard, where an empty garden swing swung in the shadows. "That I remember the good things that happened before everything. That I don't wish her any harm and forgive her, but I'm not ready to talk to her yet. Maybe sometime later." Ethan felt relief and pride. "This is a very mature decision, son. How do you feel after this?" Noah smiled slightly. "Lighter. Like I let go of something heavy. I'm leaving with a light heart, Dad." Ethan put his arm around his shoulders. "I'm glad. I'm very glad." A distant horn made them turn around. Friends had pulled up to pick up Noah, ready to ride in a convoy to college. The boys waved from the car. Noah sighed. "Well, that's it. It's time." They walked down the steps. Ethan hugged his son tightly again. "Take care of yourself there. And no, I'm always nearby. You just have to call." "I know, Dad. I love you." "I love you too, son. Very much." Noah got into the car, started the engine, waved to his family, and shouted, "I'll miss you. See you soon." The car rolled down the street, Ethan and his parents waving as it turned the corner. Ethan felt light in his soul, although he was aching from the separation. Barbara sighed quietly. "Our boy has grown up completely. And everything will be fine," Ethan smiled, hugging his mother by the shoulders. David slapped his son on the back. "Well done, both of you." Ethan stared at the road where the car had just disappeared. He remembered the day he had stared at the police car taking Noah to the hospital. How far they have come since then. He thought about the coming week. The foundation was planning a new event, and he needed to meet with several rescued families. The work continued. "Let's go into the house," he said cheerfully to his parents. "Stop being sad. We have so much good ahead of us." Barbara nodded. "Of course. I'll bake his favorite pie for his arrival. We'll wait." Ethan opened the door to let his parents in and looked out at the sunny yard, bathed in August light. The air was silent except for the chirping of crickets. He smiled to himself. Their story of grief, heroism, and triumph was just one of many. But to him, it meant everything. He knew life was unpredictable, but he believed he and Noah could weather any storm. Ethan closed the door of the house behind him, the house that would always wait for his son to return, where love, safety, and hope reign. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.